Morning, everybody, and welcome to the third Let's Talk Talent Learning at Work Week webinar. I've got the brilliant Claire with me today. She's going to be taking over, so you're going to get the world's wisdom coming from Claire today about how you build a courageous mindset. We're going to start in a couple of minutes. We normally start about 2 minutes past 9, just because people are coming in from the school run or getting coffee or coming off multiple Zooms or even Teams. So good morning, everybody. For those of you that are here and you're bright and early, congratulations. That's so fab. If you just want to say hi in the chat, who you are, what role you have in your organization and the organization that you work for, that'd be super cool, because that gives us an idea and gives Claire an idea of who she's talking to, because she can't see you and nor can I. So that would be super cool. So if you could, anybody just coming in and saying hello on the chat, just put who you are, your role, and where you work. That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Oh, I can see that. Lots of lovely messages already in the chat. Hello, everyone.
Brilliant.
So lovely to have you all here this morning.
It's lovely. It's really, it's a nice thing to do, isn't it, Claire? First thing in the morning.
One of my favorite things to do, Jo, for sure. Yeah.
And building a courageous mindset is something that I think is really important at the moment. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say and your words of wisdom to share with us all today.
I'm very excited to be sharing them with you all. It's one of my favorite topics, I have to say.
Awesome. Brilliant. So welcome, everybody. We're going to start in a couple of minutes. So if you're coming in, it's brilliant to see so many people joining this morning, and you're kind of getting your groove on in building a courageous mindset. So super excited. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to start in 2 minutes. So if you need to go and grab a coffee, water, breakfast, we can't see you, so don't need to worry. And you really don't need to worry about taking extensive notes. You can do, of course, but we will be sending you a recording of this webinar at the end. So anything that Claire talks about, you'll be able to listen back to. And also she's got some offers at the end. So again, with myself and Charlie as her handy helpers today, we'll be able to kind of point you in the right direction. So super excited to be with you this morning. So if you're joining and you don't know what's going on, into the chat, all we're asking you to do is just to say hello, say who you are, what organization you work for, and the role that you have. So can see there's so many different people from so many different businesses, Claire. So it's obviously a really hot topic, which is super cool.
Yeah.
Morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's really exciting, and the sun is shining. I'm not literally in the garden. I wish I was in the garden, but I thought I'd put a sunny background on this morning rather than just a blank white wall in the office. So there you go. Brilliant. Hi, Vanessa from Prospect. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining. Brilliant. Love it. Wonderful.
So many, yeah.
So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the third webinar in our week-long series of activities as part of Learning at Work Week. I'm Jo Taylor. I'm MD and founder of the business, and our mission and purpose is to help you get, keep, and grow brilliant people. No more, no less than that. And you are brilliant people. For turning up first and foremost, but also for developing yourself. And while we work with individuals, teams, and organizations, our core purpose is also to give back. One of our values is kind people are our kind of people, and Learning at Work Week is an epitome of that. We wanted to run this week for the HR community because we absolutely cherish it. And we love working with you, but also we want to make sure that we're giving you that love, that care and attention that you deserve, because you're giving that love, care and attention to all the people within your organizations and creating simply brilliant organizations. So why not take the time to develop yourself? And that's what Learning at Work Week is all about. And Claire and I have known each other probably over 10, 15 years, I think, Claire.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's one of my
Yeah.
favorite people, both personally and professionally. The energy that she has is just electric. So you are in for an amazing ride this morning with Claire. And I'm just really grateful, Claire, for both your personal and your professional support over at my personal journey in making me a more courageous leader, but also in helping me drive learn LTT. So with no further ado, I hand you over to the gorgeous Claire, and have a great time on this webinar. And please join us for other things during the week. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jo. And back at you in terms of building a courageous mindset. You have also helped me on my journey around that. And hello, everyone. I am very excited to be in the room with you all this morning to share some of those things around building a courageous mindset with you all this morning. Thank you for saying hello in the chat. It's always so lovely to see who's in the room, where you're coming from, what organization and the types of roles that you're doing. So thanks everyone for sharing all of that in the chat. Throughout today's session, I am going to be asking questions. So I will be jumping into the chat and it'll be great for you to share your thoughts in relation to those things as well. And as Jo mentioned, Jo and Charlie are on hand to help with all of that in the background to make this as relevant and valuable and impactful experience for you, especially as you're giving your time this morning. So a very warm welcome to today's session on building a courageous mindset. So last night, I had the really good fortune to go to a leadership event where I was listening to Declan Rice, who, for those of you that like football will know, he's a very young captain of West Ham. He's only 24 years old. And it was really interesting hearing him talk about leadership. He shared lots of brilliant nuggets of wisdom, but one that particularly stood out for me was that he talked about the importance of having those difficult conversations and having the courage to do that, sometimes with people that were 10, 15 years older than him. So, I thought it was a really relevant bit of wisdom that he shared in terms of having to do that, but also within sport, but also how relevant it is for us all in business. And I'm sure we've all been on a journey in terms of building a courageous mindset. And today I'm going to be sharing with you lots of different things on that journey in terms of how to build that courageous mindset. So what are we going to be covering today? We are going to be looking at together what a courageous mindset is. So defining what courageous mindset means to you. We're going to be looking at when it's good to use it. What are the situations where we need to step into our courage and really have those courageous conversations? We're also going to be looking at what gets in the way, what holds us back from actually stepping into our power and being courageous and having those conversations through understanding our limiting beliefs and biases. We're going to talk a bit about that. Then we're going to look at managing fear and uncertainty. And for that, I'm going to share with you a couple of case studies for work that myself and the Let's Talk Talent team have been doing with organizations. And finally, I'm going to share with you some tips and techniques in terms of communicating with confidence so that you can come out of today's session with lots of practical tools and techniques to start applying for yourself. But also if you want to bring this to your teams as well, and you'd like to bring a more courageous mindset into your organization, there'll be things that you can start to take from today's session as well. And I will be keeping an eye on the chat if there are any questions that pop up along our journey together. So on the screen, you'll see a quote by Brené Brown, who talks a lot about courage and vulnerability. And I'm sure you'll be familiar with this quote. She says, "There can be no courage without vulnerability, We have to feel vulnerable actually to step into that courage, into that courageous place. There is no growth without discomfort. And actually, that growth piece and that discomfort piece, when we think about unlocking our potential, actually, we all know as HR professionals who work in this space that in order to be able to unlock potential, we have to go through that discomfort of doing something that we might never have done before and then growing. And it's interesting to think about it through the lens of courage in terms of that growth piece. And the most courageous teams have open and honest conversations. They give and receive feedback, and they do it as part of a collaborative conversation so that they're shaping the future together. They put the greater good of the team, the work, the organization first, and there are no hidden agendas. It's all about working towards that collective goal. They challenge the status quo, take risks, and they're willing to do their best, but also to fail and get it wrong and hold their hands up, but learn from that failure. Now, it's very easy for me to say all of that, but as we know, that's no mean feat. And it's challenging to be able to do that. And so today we're going to explore how we might go about building that courageous mindset. But first, I would like to ask you all this question. What does a courageous mindset mean to you? So have a think about that question. And I'm just going to open up the chat so I can see. What does a courageous mindset mean to you? Tell me, what does it mean to your business or to your team? I'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of what a courageous mindset means to you. Angela saying, being brave, taking risks and having the confidence to do so. Yeah, doing what's right, even if it's uncomfortable. Absolutely. Firstly, emotionally strong. Yes, not conforming, being true to yourself, speaking your truth, being bold enough to speak up, be honest, taking risks, a willingness to adapt, having the confidence to put forward ideas and challenge, doing what's scary. Yeah, taking risks, being willing to change, not being scared of getting things wrong. Oh my gosh, so many amazing things in the comments. Yeah, stepping into the unknown, not being afraid to approach a challenging conversation. Yeah, so many things in there. Having integrity no matter what. Confident and being ethical. Yeah, believing in yourself. Not being a people pleaser. Oh my gosh, Christine. This is such a saboteur that can get in the way when we want to step into that courage. I know that I can definitely relate to that. Willing to take risks, put yourself outside the comfort zone. Yeah, wow, so many things that courageous mindset means to you. And another question, if I may, which is, why is having a courageous mindset important? Again, I'd love to know your thoughts. Why is it important to you personally, to your teams, to the organization? Why is having a courageous mindset important to you? To do the right thing. It helps growth because otherwise you don't learn. Yeah, it reduces your anxiety. Yeah. Yes. Progress, development. Yeah, fulfill our goals, new opportunities. Yeah, learn better, build honest relationships. Yeah, feel empowered. Definitely invites different perspectives. Absolutely. To move things on. Oh my goodness. Yes, so true. To give you agency to do the right thing, move the company forward. Yeah. So yeah, be taken more seriously by the ELT. Yes, absolutely, Susie. And those conversations, invite challenge. We want to get to the bottom of the issue is, or resolve something that's really important, that might be thorny, that might be difficult. There's the question here saying, struggle with anxiety, how does it help? Sorry, this is a real struggle with difficult people. That was in relation to, so somebody a little bit earlier in the chat said if that's a really great question, because there's polarity there, isn't there, Duncan? Often if we know we need to have a courageous conversation, that can actually make us feel more anxious, but also on the flip side of that, a discussing an issue that we know is difficult, that can help something become better, someone, a project, the organization, actually that can also reduce anxiety because you know that you're solving a problem. So yes, there are two angles to that. So thank you for asking that question. And I can say Sinine is saying in the chat, Duncan, I think it helps because you know you've done your best and are being authentic. Yeah, brilliant, excellent. Thank you for sharing all of those things in the chat to why it's important, so we can see lots of different reasons why. It's not always that easy, as we know, though. But I'm going to ask you another question, if I may, which is, if you had no fear of the consequences, what would you do? If you were able to step into that place of courage and tackle those issues, and had no fear, if you're able to move that fear or anxiety or stress out of the conversation for you, what would you do? Okay, tell senior leaders the issues I can see. Get the work done, remove the red tape. Yes, you wouldn't be holding yourself back. Absolutely. Discuss my needs with my managers mental health wise. Yeah, so stepping into your power and actually saying what's important, getting the work done, take more action, stand my ground, not be swayed. Yeah, make things happen, create more seismic changes, empower others to feel the same. Speak freely and honestly. Man, there's so many amazing things in here in terms of the positive benefit of stepping into our courageous mindsets. Be less scared of confrontation, be more productive and more positive mindsets, be completely honest. Yeah, so we can see the benefits around doing all of that, and what that means for you personally, but also what that can do for the organization as well, at a team level, and at a higher level for the entire organization. And when we think about fear, so I'm sure you're familiar with breaking down this word, false expectations appearing real. Often the anticipation, the imagined scenario that we have in our minds, at having or stepping into more courage to have those difficult conversations, can actually prevent us from having those conversations. It keeps us small, it keeps us in our comfort zone, and actually the brain rewards us for staying in the comfort zone because it can conserve energy. The brain takes up about 20% of our energy, so anything that it can do to conserve energy, keep things predictable, keep the status quo, keep us on autopilot, it will do. So it rewards us to stay in that playing small comfort zone space. But to step into courage, actually, that can also activate the amygdala, the survival threat response, which can have a physiological impact on our body. We might feel our breath start to shorten, our palms start to sweat. We might feel our heart rate increasing when we know we need to step into having one of those courageous conversations. So it's not just mind, it's also body as well. And these are real things are actually happening to us that are induced by the fear, the anticipation of having one of those conversations, or even when we're in one of those conversations. The best way to help overcome when that is happening is to take 5 long, deep breaths in and out. So you are regulating and resetting your nervous system. You're able to think more clearly. The heart rate starts to calm down a bit. So does the stress hormone cortisol starts to come out of your body, and you'll be able to think more clearly. And using just a few deep breaths, if you're having that physiological sensation in your body when you know you need to step into courage, that can really help. Just as a little bit of a tip that I use, certainly, and I've shared it with lots and lots of others, particularly when we need to step into that courage, into that courageous conversation. So let's have a look at when to use a courageous mindset. So on the screen, I'm just going to share with you a couple of things, and you've all shared a number of these things in the chat very kindly as well, in relation to my previous questions. So some really important some really important aspects when we're thinking, when is it best to use a courageous mindset? So when we can see a problem before it becomes a bigger issue. Now, this one particularly is close to my heart because I've been working with a senior leadership team who, for the last 6 months, actually haven't been having those difficult conversations and grasping the nettles and being courageous and spotting some of the problems within the organization and just stepping into courage and sharing those things or even challenging those things. And that has caused some problems. And I'll share with you a case study on that a little bit later on. But noticing when something has the potential to become a bigger problem and actually addressing it before it becomes a bigger issue is so important within organizations, because as you all know, the knock-on effect of that can be massive in terms of people, organization, and all of those things, particularly if you need to reduce costs. When you've got ideas to improve a process or a project, so this is about innovating, how can we make something better, more effective, and sharing ideas around all of that. When there's a lack of diversity and inclusion, so what's the representation? Who do we have in the room? Are we getting all the different perspectives that we need in relation to this when we're talking about different things, and making sure that you have that representation? And when you want to challenge the status quo, particularly if an idea doesn't necessarily align with the values and the goals of the organization, so that bigger picture, that kind of, you know, organizational culture and priorities, when it doesn't align to those things, it's important to step into your courage and have those conversations. Another question for you, if I may, what gets in the way? So it's all well and good, Claire, saying that these are times when you need to step into your courage. But if you think about, you know, moments when you've had to step into your courage and you might not have done, what gets in the way of this? Yeah, imposter, Angela's saying, yeah, fear of repercussions, yes, and loss of reputation. This is massive, isn't it? That judgment piece, worrying about what people might think. Excluded from decision making, so there are real impacts on this in terms of confidence, fear of rejection, confrontation, fear of disappointing others, yeah, worried of the backlash, worrying what people may think, no opportunity, being judged, ideas won't be heard, self-belief, yes, so many things, fear of others not listening, isolated, yeah, and I'm sure we've seen this happen or even felt this happen to ourselves. Existing relationships with stakeholders and prior experience, confidence, having anxiety, loss of trust, not being heard. Oh my gosh, these are huge human needs, aren't they, in terms of the things that are really important for us to feel safe within an environment to do that. And we don't always when we need to have those difficult conversations. And what was interesting in that, and thank you everyone for sharing all of those answers to the question, because often what can get in the way is our limiting beliefs and what we think, and that inner critic, the imposter, concept, and everyone has it. It's part of being human. In fact, our brains are hardwired to protect us from anything that we see as a threat within our environment. And actually, you know, not being heard, fear of rejection, fear of judgment, you know, all of these things actually are trigger our threat response in terms of that impact that it has on us. So our brains are hardwired to protect us. So that's again another thing that can keep us small in relation to those things. And some common limitations that often show up, and you've shared some of these in what we've been talking about, is that fear of failure. So what if I'm completely wrong? I'll look stupid. You know, that sort of, you know, doubting oneself in terms of your experience or who's in the room. You know, all of those things can show up when we know we need to say something that is challenging or that's difficult. The fear of rejection. You know, what if I offend somebody with my challenge? Oh no, like I'm really, you know, I've got really good relationships with all the people around me, and you know, I don't want to, you know, annoy or upset them or offend them with what I'm going to say, because they might, you know, their ego might be challenged by it. And as we know, human beings, we are complex creatures. It's, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in terms of the dynamics within work, the people dynamics. And so when we challenge others, it can bring lots of different things up. The next one is around self-confidence, and this came up in the chat. That thought that my idea isn't that good anyway, so I'm just not going to say it. It's not worth it. I'm not going to put myself out there. This also comes up, I hear quite a lot, a belief that conflict is bad. So, that idea that, well, actually nothing good ever comes from conflict. I've never seen, a situation where having conflict has been a good thing. So that's a belief system, which is really core in terms of what somebody might think and believe. And that can absolutely prevent having those courageous conversations. And then the final one, which is a belief that others know better. So, dismissing or discrediting or discounting your contribution. Oh, they're more experienced than me. Who am I to know best in relation to all of that? And tell me, have you seen any of these come up in terms of in terms of those things? Can you recognize any of those in terms of fear of failure, fear of rejection, that lack of self-confidence? Conflict is, that belief that conflict is bad or that others know better. Yeah. It can and that almost power dynamics, almost like we're giving them more power, aren't we, when we're saying, well, you know more than me, therefore who am I to kind of challenge? But actually, if we look at it from a contribution perspective, great ideas, problems that are identified can come from anywhere and anyone within the organization. It doesn't necessarily need to be somebody that is more experienced, that has the best ideas, or that can see that identify the problems. Those can come from everywhere. And the more we create an environment that encourages the conversation, the more we're going to be able to have these challenging, difficult conversations and step into that courageous mindset. And let's not forget, the limiting belief, that's an expression of the safety instinct in us. It's that part that actually wants us to stay safe from any potential emotional risk, from hurt, from failure, from criticism. Oh God, that one's massive. From disappointment or rejection, from the tribe, from our community, from our teammates, from our managers, from the organization. And this safety instinct is really cunning. It taps into our insecurities at a really, really deep emotional level by really targeting those deepest doubts and insecurities. And that limiting belief speaks to us with sort of more viciousness when we are exposing ourselves, when we're having that vulnerability of stepping into our courage. And if it's something that could trigger fear, embarrassment, rejection, failure, or pain, all of those things that we've talked about, this is why it's so powerful. So what can we do to overcome that? What can we do to overcome that limiting belief, and recognizing that safety instinct is part of our survival mechanism within us? Well, first of all, it's about becoming aware. So when you have that thought process around, actually, let me go back to that screen. Oh, what if I'm completely wrong? I might look stupid, or oh, what if I offend somebody, or they're a lot more experienced than me. When you hear that thought process going on in your mindset, become aware of it and see it for what it is. Recognize that thought process just wants to keep you small. It's just there to protect you from any emotional risk, and to keep you in your comfort zone. Challenge it. Where's the evidence of this? Is it actually true, or is it just preventing me from stepping into my courage? Ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen? Sometimes when we anticipate and think about the situation in our imagination, in our mind. Maybe we're preparing for it, that worst case scenario. Some of you have shared in a chat as well. What's the reality that will happen? Because 9 times out of 10 it probably won't. And then the key thing to do is, if you believe that it's the right thing to do, to be taking action. Because what happens if you don't? What happens if you don't address that problem? What happens if you don't see that there's something that can be made more effective on a project? What happens if you don't tackle that, thorny issue in terms of, sales and growth, or anything to do with moving the organization forward? What happens if you don't tackle it? Things don't change, and sometimes they can get worse, can't they? Missed opportunities. Yeah, absolutely. So it's really important that we do step into our courageous mindset, but also recognize that we are complex creatures as human beings, and we have over 175 different cognitive biases that can also show up. So not only can the fear and our limiting beliefs get in the way, our biases and assumptions can also get in the way as well. Things like groupthink can show up. So if we're in a team, setting and everyone is sharing ideas and we're all talking about the same thing, and you might not want to upset the apple cart, because it seems like there's really lots of great conversation going on here and we seem to be going in one direction and everyone seems to agree. And maybe if I sort of go, well, how about this? I might be rejected by the tribe. So groupthink can often show up in terms of a cognitive bias for us. The horns and halo bias is also one that can often show up. We all have that. It's that idea that we see somebody more favorably, either with the halo or less favorably with the horns, in terms of their ideas, their contributions. So those dynamics can show up. Lots of things in terms of beliefs and biases and assumptions can be showing up when we're having these conversations in us, but also within the group dynamic as well. So lots of things to think about in relation to, what shows up in terms of why the courageous mindset is important. What would we do if we had no fear? What gets in the way, our limiting beliefs, and what we can do to overcome some of those limiting beliefs, and just recognizing that our biases also show up when we're having those conversations. So next up, I want to share with you looking at managing that fear and uncertainty, and start by sharing with you a couple of case studies of clients that I've been working on with Let's Talk Talent. So the first one, and I referenced this earlier in this session today, is with a senior leadership team that I've been working with. So relatively newly formed senior leadership team of a growing business. They needed to bring more of a courageous mindset into their leadership team, because over 6 months ago, the business was doing really well. They were kind of riding that wave of growth and everything was rosy and happy. And then 6 months down the line, because they didn't grasp the nettles and have some challenging conversations within that senior leadership team, they're now having to make decisions, some difficult decisions within the organization. And one of the things that we did together, excuse me, let me just take a sip of water. One of the things that we did together was within a workshop together to foster a more courageous mindset, was use the voice print assessment tool. Now, if you're not familiar with voice print assessment tool, it is an assessment that looks at how you communicate when you are communicating in a steady state, so normal kind of conversations and communication, and then also when you're in a stressed state. So there's a number of different questions that can help to identify your natural style of communicating and your natural voices under steady state and also under pressure. And on the screen here, on the right hand side of the screen, you can see this triangle. And in here, we look at 9 different voices. On the top part, you've got the exploring voices. So these are the voices that are asking questions. So you're inquiring, you might be probing, you might be diagnosing in terms of your style of conversation. Those of you that are coaches will probably be using the exploring voices a lot in your conversations with your coachees. You've got the positioning voices on the bottom right hand side, which are all about advocating your position. You know, this shows up a lot in leadership teams, particularly newly formed leadership teams where we've still got that sort of functional mindset and we're not quite cohesive as the first team yet. We can often be stepping into a positioning voice a lot in terms of that, articulating our position, advising, sharing our expertise, all of those things. And then you've got the controlling voices on the left-hand side, which looks at being more direct, being more challenging, evaluating, and using those voices. And what was interesting in this SLT was that the loudest voices, as you would imagine, came from the CEO and the CFO, and they were using quite the controlling voices, so challenge, direct, evaluate. But actually, having looked at the voice print assessment for the makeup of the team, there was a great opportunity to bring more of a courageous mindset by using the inquiring voices. So yes, there were some strong voices in the group, but also to be able to step into courage using that inquiring voice, using the probe, using the diagnosis to get a deeper level of understanding and clarity so that everyone's contributions could be heard. So that's one example in terms of that assessment tool that was used within a workshop that really helped to create an awareness of the communication styles and how to step into a more courageous mindset through their communication. The next case study is a women in leadership team that I've been working with, and this is a group that is formed across a very large organization. Women in leadership from different departments, different divisions, all come together. And one of the things that they recognized that they wanted to work on was this need to speak up and challenge more ideas within committee meetings and often very male-dominated environments. So I worked on creating a workshop that enabled them to recognize what was going on in terms of some of those things that I shared with you earlier around the stress response that can often happen when we know we need to step into those conversations. But we also did some really powerful scenarios. So we looked at getting people into smaller groups to either be the chair of the committee meeting, be a senior stakeholder, be an observer, and we did some scenario-based exercises which really helped them to start to feel more comfortable within a safe organization, to start to build that muscle around challenging, around speaking up within that dynamic. And lots of great things have come out of those sessions that we've been doing with them in terms of building that confidence and giving them that safe space to practice and to build those courageous muscles throughout. And I guess with all of these things, the key thing is that we step out of that comfort zone that I shared with you earlier in terms of, the brain wants us to stay in that comfort zone to protect us, but also recognize that when we are having those conversations, what can often be going on for us when we step out of that comfort zone into that vulnerability and growth zone that Brené Brown talks about, is that we go into the panic, which is just outside of the comfort zone. But here's the thing. If we recognize that that panic zone is just part of that process that helps us to get into learning new ways of doing things or building that muscle and then into growth and unlocking our potential, if we can see that response, that panic response that often comes up when we're having to have those difficult conversations, that it's just part of the process to get us into learning and growth. And if we can just recognize and stay in that for a tiny bit so that we can move through it, then it will get us into learning and to growth. And I really like sharing this model because I think often when we go into that sort of panic or that discomfort that can often show up, we just want to go, we want to move far away from that. We're hardwired to move away from anything that is a threat in our environment, and it creates that panic sort of response. So just knowing that it's part of that process that gets us into learning, that gets us into growth. And it's not about taking huge steps in terms of, really putting yourself out there. It's about the smallest of steps that you can start to take. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. The next thing I wanted to share with you is actually the impact of our mindset when we go into these conversations. So what we think, and we know fear can often show up here in what we think, affects how we feel. So that fear or that negative or that worry or that concern might impact our emotions. So we might feel more anxious, we might feel more worried, and then that's going to impact our actions, what we do. And that can often show up in our non-verbal body language. So we might sort of diminish ourselves. We might, just sort of, we might do all of these things that are communicating that we're not feeling confident about something. But some really simple things, like just if you're having to have that courageous conversation over a virtual medium like we are today, just sort of sitting up straight. I know it sounds really simple, but just sitting up straight, so your back is straight and your shoulders back, so the sternum part is sort of facing upwards and looking into the camera. Actually, automatically, that is changing how I feel. I feel more alert, I feel more confident, and it changes our physiological state from that stress and anxiety, the cortisol hormone that starts racing around our bloodstream when we start to feel that, into testosterone, which is much more focused, more confident, more alert. So just small things like that we can do for ourselves that can help us at a physiological level to step into feeling more courageous. That's not to say that that's going to solve everything. It won't. These are all small incremental steps that you can do that can help, but also just being aware of what you think impacts how you feel, and then what you do and how this shows up. And so much of what we're doing, and I'm sure you'll know this very well, requires a growth mindset. So that idea that it's not going to be perfect when we first do it, and that's okay. It's it's all about learning along the way, and looking at ways in which we can just take those small steps to move forward. And so with all of that in mind, let's move into the next section on today's session, which is all about communicating with confidence and the best way to have the conversation. And for this, think about what you can control and influence, and only focus on those things that you can control and influence. So the best way to have that conversation are things like preparation. So how can you get prepared? What's the topic? What's your point of view? Who's in the room? What works for you? Know your outcome when you're having that courageous conversation. Is there anyone that you can be speaking with beforehand? Engage with them, seed your ideas, find the supporters within the room in terms of those things, so that you're already kind of setting the intention, setting the scene before you go and have those conversations. Practice. This one I found that's really helped me over the years, just recording yourself as if you're having that conversation, listening and watching it back, as painful as it can often feel, can really help to give you feedback in terms of how you're coming across, how you want to come across, so that you can refine that before you go into the conversation. And then finally, know how you're showing up. So what's your mindset before you go into that conversation? If you're physically going to have an in-person conversation, can you sit in the middle of the room so that you're taking up that space? Increase difficulty. So small steps along the way. How can you start small and then increase building your courage in different ways, and giving feedback along the way as well. And one other thing to mention in relation to this, and I'm sure you're familiar with this behavioral positions model, is thinking about how you're showing up. So we always want to be going into a conversation in that top left-hand corner. I'm okay, you're okay. Because this means that we can have that adult-to-adult conversation. We communicate in a collaborative way. We seek collaboration. We build trust and all of those things. Excuse me. The other positions mean that the balance of power, is either in your favor or in the other person's favor, and that's never going to get us a win-win outcome. We always want to be in that top left-hand quadrant. Sorry, I got my left and rights mixed up then. Another practical thing that you can do to take away is thinking about structuring how you can have that conversation. So the 3 C's is a really simple model. Consider what you're going to say, be clear about what you're saying, and then create the action. What is it that you want to happen? And just creating a little bit of preparation and thinking about structuring what you're saying in that way can really, really help. And with all of these things, having a positive intent is really, really key. So knowing how you're coming into that conversation, because you can't control how people will take your challenge. You're doing it for yourself, your department, and the organization. And at the end of the day, it's business and it's not personal. Obviously, we do have personal relationships within business, but if we're going into having a courageous mindset and addressing those issues or having those difficult, challenging conversations, we need to be coming at it from a place of positive intent, not a place of frustration or driven by other things that might be going on for us. It has to be coming from a place of positive intent, because that's what's going to get the most positive impact in those difficult conversations. So as we're coming towards the end of today's session, I hope you found it useful and helpful, and that there are maybe 1 or 2 things you're able to take away. I'm just going to do a quick recap and share with you some offers that we have for you. So when thinking about building a courageous mindset, it's really important to define what it means to you and why it's important now for you personally, for the team, for the organization. Know when to use it, and when it's important to be applying that courageous mindset. Recognize what shows up and gets in the way when we step into needing to do that, and how to overcome this. And hopefully I've shared with you some tips that can help with that. Be prepared, know what your outcome is, know what you want the result of that conversation to be, and then practice. I can't stress this one enough, and it's often the one that we don't do because we're in meetings back to back, very, very busy working lives. But actually giving yourself that opportunity to do a little bit of practice to build that courageous muscle, because the more that you use it, the stronger that it becomes. So some offers for you. If you have found this workshop helpful, excuse me, and would like to bring this version to your leaders and managers, I can see that there's a little button that's popped up on the screen. You can learn more about this and have a conversation with one of the team about how bringing this into your organization could help in terms of this particular workshop. There are lots of different exercises that we can do to shape it to be as relevant and as impactful to the audiences that you might like to bring this to. The next one is to join us for other webinars that we're running as part of not only just Learning at Work Week, but also Let's Talk Talent are amazing at bringing so many free webinars to the HR community to support you within your roles, but also within your organizations as well. So these are all free and available to you. And then finally, if you would like to have a free 30-minute consultation to explore more, this is nothing to do with selling. This is just about giving you some free consultation, advice and support in relation to what we've been talking about today. You are very welcome to book a 30-minute consultation with me to have a conversation further around it, just regarding what we've been talking about today. So That is all from me in terms of today's session. We'll be sharing with you some helpful resources as well from today's session, and I just want to say a huge thank you to you all for being amazing in terms of your contributions. So many fantastic questions within the chat and contributions. Oh yes, Charlie's just said if you have any other questions that you would like to ask, feel free. Yeah, hopefully you found this morning sharing your time with us today useful and helpful in relation to building that courageous mindset. Thanks everyone. Thank you. I'll stay around for a little bit to see if there are any more if there are any more questions. But if not, have a fantastic rest of your week and enjoy the rest of Learning at Work week. And thank you so much for being with us this morning for the Building a Courageous Mindset session. Thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks everyone. Awesome. Thanks for all the lovely comments and appreciation. Here we go. Fiona saying, how might you deal with the lack of confidence that comes from a founder who doesn't recognize your expertise or anyone else's, really? Ooh, that's a great question, Fiona. How might you deal with the lack of confidence? Is that so, Fiona? May I ask you just one more question in relation to that? Is that a lack of confidence that the founder has in the team in terms of that expertise? Because often, you know, that I guess in many ways we can't necessarily control their thoughts, but maybe it's about understanding what they're not feeling confident about, and is it to do with expertise? Is it to do with the situation? Like, where is that lack of confidence coming from, and what do they need in order to feel confident? Maybe that's the question. What does your founder need in order to feel confident about that expertise or about the situation that they're dealing with, that you're dealing with? I don't know if that's helpful. Hopefully that's but I would be asking what do they need to feel confident would be my question to them. Excellent, Sarah, thank you. Is there ever a scenario when you wouldn't have a courageous conversation? Ooh, definitely. I would say, so if you're tackling something, an issue or a problem, and it's been, you know, more than 2 weeks since that's happened, I would say it's probably too late. You really want to be having that conversation in a timely and relevant manner. Yeah, I would say make sure it's timely and relevant, because then you can address the issue. It doesn't move into another problem. Yeah, so I would say that, use your judgment on that in relation to that. And Laura's saying, my struggle related to one particular colleague taking any form of criticism very personally and making personal. So this is one of the biggest challenges. So we can't know how somebody is going to react or take our courageous conversation or our feedback or our challenge, and often if we're feeling insecure and we're on the receiving end of that, that can trigger the threat response. We can get defensive, we see it as criticism, we want to protect ourselves, you know, and it can activate all of these responses in us if we see that conversation as criticism. Remember the fear that I spoke about and the limiting beliefs, that fear of judgment, that fear of criticism, all those things can really show up, especially if we're on the receiving end of having that conversation. So what I would say, Laura, is when you're having those conversations, always come from a positive intent. I'm sure you are, but like, check in on yourself on that. Like, why are you having that conversation with that person? What's the outcome that you want from that conversation, and what's gonna help them? Because you want to be going into that conversation adult to adult. You don't want that to slip into parent child, which can often happen if somebody's being defensive or seeing something as criticism. That dynamic can often shift. So if you're faced with that, then still have the conversation, but make sure that it's coming from a place of positive intent. And also you could even ask the conversation, how would it be best for me to have this conversation with you? What's going to be most helpful for you? You know, there's an issue here that we need to talk about. How best is it for me to have this conversation with you? So you're actually asking them how they want to receive that feedback. That can often be helpful. Awesome. I think that's all the questions in the chat. Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for your time and your amazing contributions this morning. Have a great rest of your week, and yeah, enjoy the rest of Learning at Work week. Thank you everyone. Bye bye.